And we have a resolution to go into closed session.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Councillor Gowdy. Resolve that council resolve itself into committee of the whole closed session as authorized under section 239 of the Municipal Act to consider adoption of closed minutes of meeting held May 15th, 2024, labor relations or employee negotiations as it relates to management non-union compensation, and labor relations or employee negotiations as it relates to the collective agreement with QP 2290.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. So we'll be moving next door. We're running just a little bit late this morning, but we'll get through it all. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place of the First Peoples and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the county is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. We will now have our first resolution.
Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Leonard, resolved that council rise from committee of the whole closed session, that bylaw 22-2022-0026 be waived, and that the warden report.
Discussion? All those in favor? And the report coming out of closed is that we have a collective agreement with CUPE.
So that's moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Deputy Warden Vandewaal, that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute a collective agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 2290, in accordance with the arbitration award dated June 12th, 2024.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Motion for the minutes. Sorry. There's no addendums. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof of any item on today's agenda by any member of council? Councillor Gowdy.
Yes, under information reports, item A, the transportation report, it's my place of employment and I wrote the report.
We'll note that in the minutes. Okay, adoption of the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lichty, seconded by Councillor Greenwood Spears, resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting held May 15th, 2024 be adopted.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Carried. Delegations. We have with us today Sally McIntyre, General Manager, Mississippi Valley Conservation Authority, and David Ellingwood, General Manager, Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority, to make a presentation regarding the conservation land strategy. Please come up to the microphone. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and I very much appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm doing the rounds, as it were. We're talking to all of our municipalities about this important project that we're doing. All conservation authorities across Ontario are tasked this year with providing 6 deliverables by the end of the year. And the land conservation strategy, as we're calling it, is one of those deliverables. And it's a document that needs to speak to, it's a policy document that will speak to our approach to the acquisition and disposal of assets going forward and our management of our lands. I'm just wondering, I did share the PowerPoint with you, did I not? You did not receive the PowerPoint. Well, then you will just get me talking to you, and that's fine. I had thought that it had been sent, so this is all good. So the policy document, if you think about it, it's like an official plan. You as a municipalities and a county all own various assets, and you need to have a sort of a long-term vision for what you're going to do with those assets. And so similarly, conservation authorities have to give that the same kind of consideration. One of the things that we're tasked with looking at is, for instance, our recreational lands. Now, most municipalities do have recreational parks, but a lot of them are for active recreation. You know, you're looking to provide sports fields and ice, rinks and that sort of thing. But a conservation authority is more looking at large parcels for natural passive recreation. And so MVCA has 6 conservation areas in our jurisdiction, and we need to be thinking over the long run whether or not this is something we want to expand on. One of the things that we're all experiencing is the pressure of growth, and during COVID, many of you may have observed that many campgrounds and parklands were overrun with folks, you know, and what we've seen in our jurisdiction is that while numbers have declined since COVID, they haven't gone back to pre-COVID levels. And you may have also heard in the news, of course, that there's a demographic generational change happening, that quite frankly, with the younger generation not able to afford housing, that they're investing more in experiences, and they're looking for opportunities to travel and to explore and to experience the outdoors is one of the things that they're looking for. And so with an expanding population, there are pressures on the land to provide that kind of facility. So a lot of this document's going to be looking at, you know, where and when would we look at acquiring land? Is our current portfolio appropriate? And how does it best integrate with the assets you have and your plans? So we're going to be publishing next month some background documents. One's a discussion paper that poses specific questions about what you think we as a CA should be doing and how it can best integrate with your assets within our watershed. And because the province in its direction to conservation authorities is quite clear that we need to be carving out our space as distinct and adding value to the portfolio within the broader community, you know, of services being provided by the county, the municipalities, the province itself, the federal government, land trusts, Ducks Unlimited, other NGOs that are operating in this sphere. So we need to find what our niche is in that arena and how best we can address that. So that's all on the sort of recreational, passive, land use. Now, in our current portfolio, we have some programs and services that are not classified as passive. We own a museum, we own heritage buildings and the like, and we need to figure out going forward, what are we going to do with those? It's not that we're not allowed to operate and maintain those, but the funding model is very different under the new political regulatory regime. So we need to ask some tough questions about how are we going to operate and maintain those heritage structures and facilities going forward. And as I'm sure all of you can appreciate, museums are near and dear to people's hearts in the community. They represent the history of the communities. And therefore, we're seen as the caretaker of that museum for the greater Lanark area as it happens. So, so the policies that are going to be in this document are going to have to start to address those kind of challenging questions that we as an organization have to address. Another piece of it is that we own and operate many dams. Now, I can't speak to Cataraqui, which most of you and Quinte would be more familiar with, but a lot of our dams, I would say generously, we acquired through happenstance. The province came to us at a certain point and said, here are 5 dams, we think you should operate them. And it was in the early days of MVCA, and I guess somewhat naively at the time, we said, sure, we'll take those dams and operate them. And over the subsequent years, as well, many municipalities came to us and asked us, could you build a dam here? Could you take over a dam there? And so now today we find ourselves with owning 11 dams and we operate 18. And we have to look at that mix and figure out how we're going to manage the current portfolio and what philosophically will we do down the road, because in the face of climate change, some of these assets need significant capital renewal. And do we want to replace like for like? So there's real serious questions we need to answer about our dam management, and dams being a significant amount of our land inventory. And you need to think about not just the asset as you own it today, but also the area that's flooded by that asset, areas that you might need to access over time when you rebuild it, like you need staging areas and that sort of thing. And if you were to look at our mapping, it's challenging for those things. Some of the mapping dates back to quite literally 1910, and it's not registered on title, let's just say. So, it's going to be challenging for us to deal with. So I just wanted to make you aware that this is work we're doing. All of the CAs in the province are working on these right now. And we really do want the input from the county and from our member municipalities because we are tasked with integrating with your plans and making sure that we have a cohesive plan for our jurisdiction, that we're not tripping over each other. CAs aren't, unnecessarily stomping on other people's grounds, and that we're sticking to our mandate and we're working collaboratively. So that's what my goal is here today, is to make you aware of this work and let you know that I am very interested in hearing your feedback. Your county planners will be receiving, the documents for comments, and I really hope that they bring them forward to you to provide feedback on. So happy to answer any questions you have.
I'm sure we'll get them. And no, we don't want dams. Thanks. Just in case you were going to gift them to us. Ron,
Well, I did write that down, actually. Dams are very expensive. I know that. We even have some that. And what is the option? Hopefully not downloading.
Yeah.
To municipalities, so.
So, I'll tell you the way the regulation is worded. It basically says what our mandate is, which is natural hazard management. And so where an asset is serving that purpose, that's our mandate. There's no reason why we would give that up, right? But we have two dams, one in Tay Valley and one in North Frontenac, that were built solely entirely to maintain recreational water levels. And that's the conversation we need to have. Now, we're not going to turn it back to the municipality. That's not something I'm contemplating. But we do need to look at, the funding model for them. Now, both of those facilities are very small, because they're just designed to maintain recreational levels. And there's different things that we can contemplate going forward with respect to them. But it's one of those conversations that we've been tasked by the province to have, because there is within our funding regime an element where if only one municipalities or a handful of municipalities are benefiting from the asset or the service, that you can do, prorated funding models for them. So again, it's on the table, it's up for discussion, but I'm not committed one way or the other, just so you know. But it's my responsibility to put it on the table, and we have the conversation so that we can define the policy, so that I, as general manager, have direction, because I draft the budget.
Ron, you have one follow-up?
Well, and maybe David's gonna allude to it too, but is this study gonna look at what properties you own that might be disposable or
Absolutely. In fact,
turned over to somebody else?
that's one of the first tasks that all the CAs were, so it's one of the 6 deliverables by the end of this year, is a complete asset inventory. So we've pretty much all the CAs have already completed the inventory. And then the next step is, what are you going to do with those assets? And so one of the things we have to think about, and again, it kind of pertains to North Frontenac, because we have some properties in North Frontenac that it's even hard to understand how we acquired them. I haven't been able to find the full paper trail. But personally, I think they'd be great to be integrated into the campground, rental program that North Frontenac runs. So whether we sold it to North Frontenac for, whatever, or that we just retained North Frontenac to manage them as part of that inventory of campsites, I want us to be creative, and it's not just about disposal, because in all those cases where we have these sort of small remnant properties, they're all within the floodplain. And we're not going to sell it for somebody to think that they can develop it, when the reason why we acquired it in the first place was because we didn't want people to develop. But that's not all the case with all the CAs. Some CAs absolutely have assets they are desirous of disposing.
Councillor Greenwood Spears.
Thank you. This is a more technical question maybe, but how do you transition from the land to wetlands in front of the shoreline? And that in your consideration, and when you're given recommendations for development of any sort? And do you ever consult with Fisheries and Oceans if it's habitat for fish nurseries and things of that nature?
Okay. I'll give you a partial answer, because admittedly, I'm not the expert in that exactly, but I can tell you this. There are certain tests that we are able to perform a combination of what kind of plants are growing, what kind of soil types there are, historical, records regarding water levels and the actual elevation of land to determine whether something is a wetland. So there, in reviewing a property that has waterfront and whether or not a certain setback is required because there is wetland there. Those are the sorts of things that staff are looking at, is to determine whether it's a hydrophilic environment, indicating that, the plant life there and the soils are conducive to prolonged periods of wet. That would be in a nutshell.
Okay. And the aspect of having fisheries and oceans ever contacted?
So certainly, we're doing a project on Kashwakimak Lake Dam right now. We're doing an EA. And so for major projects like that, not for your typical, development, and that would be something I think the municipalities would need to reach out to, depending on whether you're doing an EIS, an environmental impact statement. You're requiring that from the developer. So we're not in the fish and wildlife business, and any comment on ecological values was removed from our mandate in the past 5 years. So we do not comment on natural heritage values and the like.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, well, I'll turn it over and introduce my new colleague from Cataraqui, David Ellington.
Good
Welcome,
morning.
David.
Name's David Ellington. I'm new general manager downstairs in the building here at Cataraqui Conservation. We're very pleased to be sharing this wonderful facility with your county staff and good relationships that we're developing, and it's been a good benefit for the Conservation Authority to take up residence here. In terms of the program that Sally was talking about, just sort of maybe a reassurance, being a county with multiple conservation authorities in it, and being in receipt of these documents from each of us over the next couple of months. I just wanted to reassure that the legislation does provide the foundation for all of us and the common elements that we need to have in there. So that's essentially what the conservation authorities are using. So we have similar goals and objectives for what these documents will do. Where it starts to depart is when we get into the watershed. So different parts of the county do have different physiography to them, and so that gets reflected in our document, in the types of properties that we have, and how we consider what properties might be suitable for acquisition and what ones might be candidates for disposal if they're not meeting certain values that we have. At Cataraqui Conservation, we have 4,700 hectares of property that we manage. We have 9 conservation area properties, and then a bunch of other lands. Some, for example, like valley lands in the city of Kingston. We also have the Cataraqui Trail, so about 220 kilometers of linear trails that we manage. So those are important features. I like to think of them as one of the positive parts of the Conservation Authority's work. People really like us for the conservation properties and the recreation opportunities, the education programs that we have there. They don't so much like us for our regulatory side, but hopefully we do a good job with the conservation areas to compensate for that. And the conservation area strategy that we're tasked with doing, it's really sets up the guiding principles. What are we trying to achieve with these properties? Some of that's already set in legislation, but it's also part of what we do and matches up with our objectives for the Conservation Authority. And then we have an inventory of properties. We have acquisition, disposition guidelines and policies. So when we put those together, we end up with potentially a network of properties that have values and character that are representative of all parts of our watershed. So we have recreation properties, we have some natural properties, we have properties to protect from flooding. We have some that are suitable for education, some that are just nice properties. They are representative of the resources that we have in the area. We are trying not to duplicate what other agencies do. We have provincial parks, they have a role. We have Nature Conservancy and other nonprofit groups that also have inventories of property. What I'm trying to do is utilize this strategy and our inventory to find out if there's any pieces missing. And it's not necessarily the Conservation Authority that needs to have these pieces in hand, but if we can work with these other agencies to get that kind of representative properties across the watershed held in these different bodies, then that's kind of my goal from it. So there may be opportunities for us to acquire some properties. There's funding programs that we can leverage, and that's a benefit to the municipalities in our jurisdiction. Is the funding that we can get for whether it's dam properties, we can access $50 from the province to do repairs on the dams that we do have. So that's one reason why you might want us to keep them, because we can access that money, at least get 50% of it paid. So the plan is to we have a rough draft of our document. We'll be bringing that to our board. We're going to do some public consultation to get some feedback on the general principles that we have in those documents, and then we'll have some more public consultation. We'll finish these documents up by the end of the year. So that's everything that we have.
Any questions or comments for David? Judy?
Thank you very much, Ned. I was just wondering in your policy and procedure, as well as in your staffing, that how many Indigenous people are involved in the decision-making and what your approach is, since this is land that they've been looking after for time immemorial. So
Yes. So so part of the process for putting together the strategy is to do outreach and have time for Indigenous input to it. So that's one approach that conservation authorities are required to do as part of this. In terms of people that are actively involved in decision making or on any committees, that sort of thing, we don't have that in our structure right now. And it's something that's kind of
Follow up,
needs to
Judy?
be developed.
okay, and that would be my recommendation then, that you embed the Indigenous into your organization as well as into your policy. So it's not just outreach,
Yes.
but they're part at the table from the get-go.
Okay, Fred, and then we need to move on, folks.
Just very briefly, welcome to your position. I'm sure we'll see a lot of you. The Cataraqui Trail is currently not motorized right now. You're not allowing ATVs and things like that on the trail.
Right.
Is there any plans to allow that to happen in the future? Or you might be too new, you can't answer that.
So I have met with the kind of our chair of the Friends of Cataraqui. There is motorized use in the wintertime, so it's kind of a seasonal use of it. Before anything like that could happen, it would take a lot of serious consideration to just the managing of the conflict between the pedestrian and other user groups and motorized vehicles. That would be you have to have a lot of consideration for how to address that. If there's any physical things to put in place, enforcement would be another strong consideration there.
Okay, thank you very much, David. All right, we have a proclamation. National Indigenous Peoples' Day.
And with your permission, we'll just go to the resolve clause, moved by Councillor Gowdy, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Therefore be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac hereby proclaims June 21, 2024 as National Indigenous Peoples' Day in Frontenac County.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. Motion to move into the Committee of Whole.
Moved by Councillor Leonard, seconded by Councillor Fowler, that council adjourn and meet as Committee of the Whole Council with the Deputy Warden in the chair.
Discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
First order of business is the briefing from Mr. Kevin Farrell, CAO.
So good morning, Deputy Warden, Warden and Council. So we have a busy agenda today, so I'll try and keep mine short and keep it at a high level. But as always, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them at the end. So we'll start with the CAO schedule for June. So I did take a week of labor relations training through Queen's University at the start of June. A few of us also attended the AMCTO conference. Yesterday, we were in beautiful Plevna in North Frontenac for the joint CAO and treasurers meeting. So that was good to meet with the group. We have an emergency management committee meeting following this meeting at 1 o'clock. We're doing some work again with the EOWC, some CAO planning meetings coming up. Next week, we start our first pass of our business plans and project proposals. So that's on Monday and Thursday. So that's just some of the highlights around the schedule. I won't spend much time on these next three slides, but they're there for reference for council. So there's some AMO communications. There's some education opportunities that might be of interest to council, as well as some policy update information there as well. In terms of human resources, in terms of recruitment, we've had 162 postings as of June 11th. Interviews are ongoing in all areas of Fairmount. We have 16 full-time summer contracts posted for Frontenac paramedics that are being filled. And we have our program and clinical manager nurse practitioner positions. 2 positions were posted and 2 offers have been accepted. We're also working through the interview process for the project manager senior planner. And we have now posted for the paramedic chief director position. So big shoes to fill as Gail gets closer to retirement. In terms of labor relations, as council is aware now, we have an interest arbitration award with QP 2290. And then under miscellaneous, Lisa Moreland continues to lead our scheduling software implementation. So that work is moving along nicely. We also have a managing in a unionized environment training session planned for June 26th. So it's being hosted by the county with 27 attendees from county, South Frontenac, and 2 other municipalities as well. A Fairmount Home update. So the spring COVID vaccine clinic has provided 92% of the home's residents with the vaccine. They undertook a code yellow missing resident emergency drill that was completed with staff to improve the home's emergency management program. Residents attended the Walk for Alzheimer's on May 25th, raising $2,200 to support Alzheimer's Society's programs and services. And the resident gardening group had a plant sale on May 15th, and they raised close to $1,500 for their gardening program, which is quite nice. This here is our Fairmount Home Annual Butterfly release. It was another huge success. Family members were invited to a ceremony that included live music, a video tribute, and the release of live butterflies in honor of their loved ones. And I don't have a slide for it, but also yesterday we had our BPSO kickoff event. So a big thank you to Susan Brandt and all the dedicated staff for pulling together an exceptional celebration. So, and a big thank you to the council members who were able to attend and show their support. Deputy Warden Vanderwall did a great job emceeing that event. So some updates on the paramedic side. So orientation has begun for 17 new paramedics. They spent time in the classroom, learning about our equipment and doing driver training. They are now out riding with mentor crews to complete their orientation before hitting the road by the end of June. During Paramedic Week, we also hosted barbecues for paramedics and gave recognition pins for babies delivered and cardiac arrest saves. In terms of engagement and communications across our channels, we have outstanding performance in May. Digital engagements measured over 66,000, which is very strong improvement over last month. This is expected for this time of season, but it's up 8% for the same period last year, which is good to see. The Touch the Truck event on May 10th did extremely well, and posts related to Paramedic Service Week and paramedic recruits saw a lot of engagement. So work on the community planning permit system for waterfront development is moving forward. We now have an Engage Frontenac project page with more details for people to access. In terms of development inquiries and applications, these remain steady for this time of year. 7 of the 20 applications were processed under the recently approved delegated authority, so this speeds up the whole process. In terms of economic development, the Economic Development Annual Report is now available, along with the KMP Trail Annual Report. And Richard and Debbie have been going and visiting each township council to present that report. We had 33 local business owners representing all 4 townships that joined the county staff at Elements Fitness on the morning of June 11th for a networking event, and that was quite successful. And we also now have information on our Engage Frontenac page related to healthcare in our community, that project. And then my final slide is around a KMP Trail update. So annual maintenance is now taking place. This includes brushing and mowing, grading from Verona to Clarendon Station, some dust suppression work, installation of edge protection south of Harrowsmith. And then the final note there is that the Frontenac ATV Club, along with the OPP Save team, we're patrolling the KMP Trail on Friday, June 7th. So I think that was successful as well. So that's it for me. If there's any questions.
Councillor Leonard?
Thank you. Back to the Frontenac paramedics. I just had a little episode on the weekend, and the profession, just unbelievable. That's and they know how to drive. But it was excellent. Kudos to them.
Councillor Greenwood Spears?
I see that you're having an emergency management committee meeting today. Will you be covering off heat dome in particular in that? Because that is the number one cause of death in related to disasters at this point in time. And another question I had was regarding the provincial matters and the enabling change program. Have you consulted with Fairmont? Because there seems to be opportunity that we could get some funding for some of the hard costs that they identified as being needed in that particular program ends on June 27th for application. So I want to make sure we get all the bang for the buck.
So I'll touch on the second one. Yeah, I'll work with Susan to look into that a little closer in terms of what funding is available. And in terms of our emergency management meeting, we're covering different things today, but I'm sure that will be part of the conversation in terms of the heat.
Yes.
And I did go to the website and that for the Engage Frontenac on the community planning, but one of my suggestions would be that we have something in there regarding First Nation fisheries and oceans consultation whenever there's waterfront planning near significant wetlands to be included, and I couldn't see any of that, and I put the comments in on the website.
Perfect, thank you.
Counselor Saunders?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Kevin, thank you for your report. Very thorough. As you probably are aware, we're incurring staffing shortages on the Frontenac Howe Islander to the point now where we can't provide the traditional break coverage, lunch and break coverage on the weekends. Do you have an update on recruitment?
I'm looking to Barb and
So currently through the deputy warden, we are in the review of one recruit doing his recruitment process. The other one is approximately 1/3 of the way, and we've just interviewed another.
Just to follow up, that looks like that'll address a short-term issue. Is there a longer-term plan to, I guess, correct the staffing situation? We seem to be running into staffing shortages all the time.
So I guess through the deputy warden again, the long-term solution will be hopefully canvassing back and forth. There are lack of courses right now. The only institution that is available to train is Georgian.
Any other questions or comments? I just have one comment, and I guess it can go through you, but it's going to go to planning and economic. Last night, South Frontenac received a sort of a joint study on growth of population and all of this here. The county was involved also. Sorry, to our council. And the question that came up is, if we're supposed to go up 6,000 people in the next 30 years, is the OP going to reflect that we actually can create this? And so I don't know if that's going to go back to Mr. Gallivan or not, but as everybody knows, we're in the middle of our official plan and we think it's too restrictive, obviously. But how is the OP going to reflect that? And so those questions are going to get asked to see whether they actually can meet those targets.
Deputy Warden, thank you. So just a reminder to County Council that you are the approval authority for lower tier official plans. So the South Frontenac Township has been working on a new official plan for almost 2 years. We're working closely with them. Ms. Sonia Bolton is leading it on the county side. We'll do our best to make sure that we work with your team to make sure you can accommodate growth, especially because of the communal services work and the utility up and running. You are going to be definitely a target for a lot of growth in the next 20 years.
Thank you. Okay, nothing else. Thank you, Kevin. Mr. Farrell. There's no unfinished business, no consent, no committee management. Recommended reports from the Chief Administrative Office consultant briefing. And who's in charge of this? Okay.
Shall I proceed?
Yep.
Okay.
You're there.
No, I'm here. Okay, thank you. I'll share my screen here. All right. Did it share?
So far, so good.
All right. Thank you very much for your time on the agenda again. And I'll walk through this fairly quickly on the council compensation review that we were engaged to undertake. As with the non-union review, Gallagher was retained by the township or the county, pardon me, to assess the remuneration practices and the expense policy practices for the members of council, the elected officials, as compared to municipalities of similar size and scope of responsibilities. Considerations when we talk about remuneration for council, it's very different than what we would look at for an employee group where you're looking at competition. Here we're looking at really, is the compensation or the remuneration provided respectful of the roles and responsibilities of each member of council? Does it recognize the time commitments? Is it fair and reasonable relative to other organizations, i.e. other county levels? And is it fiscally responsible as well? So affordability is definitely a concern. The report that I'd provided outlines the findings of the review and the observations that we provided. The analysis was based on 9 comparator organizations that were established in 2021. We maintained that that comparator group. We developed a survey questionnaire for the municipalities to provide information on what they provide their council-based remuneration, any per diems that are available to individuals on council. What are the reasons why when a per diem would be paid or not paid? Any allowable expenses that add, reflect that that compensation that they're paid, which includes cash allowances like mileage or travel allowances, and then access to benefits, insured benefits, and/or pension opportunities. We gathered the information, tabulated the response, and provide the comparison to the county practices. So across all of these organizations, they did confirm that base remuneration in their respective municipalities typically recognizes the time required for attending the council meetings and to participate on various boards and committees of council. The county base remuneration for the county of Frontenac is listed in the chart there. We had 9 observations for warden and councillor. Only 3 of the comparator organizations had a deputy warden role specifically defined. And if we look at the market analysis compared to those 9 municipalities, at the middle of the market, the far columns on the table, the county is definitely has quite a significant gap to achieve the median of the marketplace. So for the warden position, there's a gap of 64% where you are below the market median, almost 31% for the deputy warden, and 51% for the councillor current remuneration pay. The county does offer a per diem available to be used. I believe it's primarily for when you go on conferences or for other meetings, some additional meetings with some caveats. It's $150. The average of the comparator organizations is $180. So it's a little bit low relative to what your comparator organizations are offering. 5 of those 9 comparator organizations are offering health benefits directly through enrollment in a insured benefits plan that they have in there for their staff. Or if they don't allow for enrollment, they may offer pay in lieu of enrollment or a health spending account. Usually the amount is equivalent to whatever the premiums the municipality would be paying for enrolling in the insured benefits plan. So there's some definite activity there. Alignment for the recommendations coming out of the review is to align the remuneration to the 50th percentile. That is your target pay policy. To do so, which is the middle of the market, we are suggesting and recommending and confirming that you conduct a market review every term of council to make sure that you do try and keep some alignment to the municipal organizations. And then in terms of actually adjusting the base pay, we've offered some options available. Obviously, there's any variation thereof that can be discussed or approached. Option 1, do nothing, maintain your current rates, provide your annual cost of living adjustment that you may provide year over year. Or all in, adjust the base pay for each of the three roles to bring them within that 10% range, at least get it closer to the market median, not necessarily rate up to the market median, which is an option, but to help temper some of the costs. A suggestion is to at least get within 10% of those market median data points, or some variation of phasing it in. So I've done an example in the report that says maybe if you add 10% each year, you can phase it in over a number of years to try and get closer to that market median, or at least 10% of the market data point. And that's the end of the presentation.
Questions or comments? Councillor Gowdy.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I just have a concern with our comparators. As has been said earlier, these aren't counties that are really comparable to us. Yes, they might be in size or population, but the jobs that the councils do in those other areas might include transportation or other services when we basically only do 3 or 4. So the comparator just kind of throws me off. And in this day and age, we really have to watch every penny that we spend when our taxpayers are struggling as well.
Councillor Greenwood Spears.
Yes, I also have concerns regarding the comparators, and quite frankly, our budget is much smaller than any of the comparators, as well as our population base. So going anywhere beyond the 50% mark is just not reasonable, my approach. That, and as Councillor Gowdy pointed out, and that the responsibilities at the county level for council is smaller than even some of the single tiers that we're currently being compared to. So I would also add to caution rather than thinking that we're being grossly underpaid.
Warden Smith.
I think this is probably the 10th time I've seen documents about our salaries, and we never really do much about it. And we are underpaid, and we do have major responsibilities, whether we get paid for them or not. Of these 3 choices, I would like to see us look at phasing something in over the next 4 or 5 years, or 6 years, whatever. But I think we underestimate ourselves and what we need to do in these positions. It's a lot of responsibility, it's a lot of liability, and we're here to look after our residents. And if we want good people at this table over the years to come after we're gone, we need to start paying a reasonable amount of money. So I would support number 3.
Councillor Lichty.
So when I read through the actual documents, this was before council in 2021. At that point in time, it was a 50% comparator mark or median mark, and the council elected to go with $4,000. So I'm looking to the warden and the deputy warden for some guidance as to why you chose that 4,000 then, because the rest of us were not on council at the time. So could you give us a little bit of background, please?
Ron, you should go ahead, because I think
The last time the 4,000 was chosen was to try to bring it up a little bit farther. But I did vote against that one also. Just so you
wanted him
know.
to say it instead of me.
So, but that was the rationale at that time, is my memory. Yes, Councillor Lichty.
So I have a question, hopefully, well, maybe for the CAO or through the mayor or through the ward with the CAO. How is council's salary or council's wage compensation increased every year now? Like, so is it cost of living? Is it a flat 2% or? Because there is a difference.
Alec, you want to try that one?
That's a fairly simple answer. It's a fairly simple answer, actually. So it's the same wage adjustment that the non-union would get. So it's not necessarily tied to inflation. If council approves a 2% increase for non-union, council gets that increase as well.
The biggest difference is obviously somebody's paid 10 times more than what council is, or 5 times, sorry, not 10.
Yeah, but it's an optics thing.
Right. Councillor Fowler.
Yes, regarding the responsibilities, I understand the responsibilities, but liability is also a consideration. And I hope we do have errors and omissions insurance, like lawyers would have. I assume that's what we do have. So we do have that protection. And we have to keep that in mind. And that probably goes up every year too for the insurance companies.
Councillor Lichty?
I'm not trying to be a pain. I'm just saying, this is kind of a damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I agree with the warden that we need to respect the decisions that we are dealing with and the expertise around this particular table. We have a $50 million plus budget, and we're paid less than the counselors at North Frontenac with a $7 million budget. So even though they have a different look because they're dealing with small things, property, building a house here or a walkway here or doing a road, and yes, we don't have roads and we don't have arenas and whatever else. So some of the comparisons, I agree, they really aren't a comparator, but I still think we should look at increasing the amounts that we've got. Not by a substantial amount, but at least somewhere in between. And then, you know, maybe looking at a cost of living index increase every year, because if we don't, we're just going to keep going like this. And if we go down the road 4 years from now and we do this again, we're going to be here, and they're, instead of being here, the other comparators, they're going to be here. So that just gets wider and wider and wider and wider.
Anyone else? Councillor Saunders?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Let me state the obvious. It's never popular to vote yourself a raise. I think we're all well aware of that. I'm in favor, I would support the comments made by the warden. We keep kicking this can down the road. We just spent up, I don't know what the cost was. We just spent some money on another consultation or report. And if we ignore it, then we're going to spend that money again in a couple of 3 years. So it just keep going over and over and over again. I did have one question perhaps for the treasurer. Option 3, which I believe is what the warden was recommending. What's the annual cost for those increases? I try to do the math and I'm not sure exactly what it is.
So through you, Deputy Warden, over the 2025 to 2028 range, it would go from 15,000 in the early year to about 20,000 in the later year. On a percentage basis, you'd be somewhere between 0.12 and 0.15% of the levy.
So if I could then for clarification, so in 2025, this would cost the taxpayers $15,000 in total?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so seeing I haven't got to spoke, and apparently I'm not going to now because I have to wait for the motion, is what the, if we had questions for the presenter, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Other than that, we should read the motion first and then have the discussion. So does anybody have a question for Jane? For Jane Greenwood Spears.
Did you have any discussion with staff regarding changing the number 9 competitors that were used for this program?
Yes, we did. We had some conversations about the comparator organizations. When I first had our kickoff meeting, I looked at them and I was a little bit surprised that you would have some of these organizations in your review. However, I wasn't the consultant on when you did the 2021 review, so I don't know the rationale behind their selection. Maybe they were appropriate at that point in time, but definitely I would suggest that anytime you do a review, you don't lock yourself into a comparator group because organizations change. Some are growing faster than others. Some have more, issues or less issues. So you want to look at your comparator group each time you do a review. You want some solid continuity, but some may change over time.
The CAO would like to add.
Yeah, and just to add, so as part of the recommendation was to look at adding Hastings County, Leeds and Grenville, as well as Renfrew County go forward.
Just a comment. I know Hastings, the warden is about 90,000. I'm not so sure we compare.
Throw
really
that one
well.
out.
Yeah, and I would suggest Dufferin probably isn't a fair competitor. It's right, up to Toronto and that Oshawa, so it's, yeah.
Okay, no other questions then for Jane? Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
We're going to read the motion and then maybe I'll have a word to say.
Moved by Councillor Lichty, seconded by Warden Smith, Excuse me. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the office of the Chief Administrative Officer, Gallagher Benefit Services Canada Group, Inc., 2024 Council Compensation Survey and Review Report, and further that council approve one of the following recommendations contained in the Gallagher Report commencing January 1, 2025. So the motion will need to be amended to choose just one of those three options. So you're now able to discuss.
Discussion for anybody that hasn't had it? Okay, I'd like to make a couple of comments. Pardon? Okay, Councillor Leonard.
Well, I don't agree with the percentage right off the bat. Never have, because it's unfair as far as I'm concerned. I would like to see, and I don't know how it could ever be done, but I'm quite sure there's a certain gentleman in here that might know how. To go to a dollar value straight across the board. If you get $1, I get $1. That way it keeps everything from going this way. And it keeps everything even. Because it only makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of comments. I cannot support an increase that I could not support for staff. And whether you want to use percentages or you don't want to use them, it's no different than if your CAO makes 200,000 and they get 2% or we get 2%. It's the same way at our council. And so I could not support 10% here if I couldn't support it for a staff. So I will not. My privilege and honor of commitment is to South Frontenac, and it is 100% more time work than the county is. And to say that you cannot attract good people to the county table because of compensation is not true, because you're elected to this seat by default of being elected to your council. So that's how you get here. It's not because you're looking at the money. I never ever looked at the pay when I ran for my own council. That's not, I assume that's not why you run. And I never have. So I cannot support these kind of increases. I make about the same as what the warden makes in my own township. And we do not do a compensation review. I don't know when the last one was, 10 years, 8 years. And maybe that's my own fault. I don't know, but I'm just saying every 3 years to look at a compensation, I would, other than the percentage, I know what Councillor Leonard is saying, but if the average of the marketplace, everybody seems to be settling at somewhere around 3.5%. If you take that into a dollar amount, I don't care. But there's no way I can support these increases. And I've been through the warden's chair. Now, maybe Kelly treated us too easy, but it was not the strenuous workload that I actually have in my own township. And I don't want to say my own township is strenuous. I don't mean it that way. But the workload is no comparison to what my own municipality is. And so if I'm making 5,000 or whatever it is more at my own municipality, I can't justify going past that as at a county level. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know what you want to do now. However, I don't know if you want to come up that it works out to a percentage or a dollar amount or what you would like to suggest. But I guess if you're not staying at the same, somebody has to make a suggestion. Warden Smith.
I would suggest that we look at putting number 3 to a vote. That's the 10% adjustment over 4 to 5 years.
Does anybody want to second that? Councillor Saunders. On that note, though, we need a recorded vote then. Oh, I guess I have to ask all in favor of putting 3 on or just vote on?
Well, Warden Smith is moving a motion to amend, to choose option 3, and it's been seconded by Councillor Saunders.
Okay.
Are you requesting a recorded vote?
Do you want
Don't
a
need it yet.
discussion?
Pardon?
Discussion?
That amendment.
Do we have to vote on it?
A motion to amend is open to discussion. and
Go ahead,
debate.
Councillor Greenwood Spears.
Okay. So just to be clear, there's a variance in here between 4 to 5 years by 10%, so that's a 2% or a 2.5% increase it's talking about. And currently, our salary goes up whatever the percentage of the non-unionized management salary is. So I just want to get that piece clarified, and that didn't seem to be one of the options provided. And that, to me, that should have been, that's the status quo to continue on with. And I think that option should be left in, and it's not here. Unless it's number one. Okay, well, per diems and conventions, I guess, covers it.
We can only discuss the amendment
Okay,
right
so
now.
my clarification was that is it 2.5% over 4 years or 2% over 5 years?
So option 3, the table speaks to a 10% adjustment each year. And
Each year.
if Alex wants to add to that,
Okay, glad I asked for clarification.
Okay, yes,
Here, I'm gonna just quickly cover them all. So option 1 would be your status quo. So that would be your cost of living increases. So those will be approved by council each year at budget. Option 2 would be a one-time increase to get within 90% of what the P50 comparator was. Option 3 is increasing the rates by 10% from what they are in 24 over 4 years.
so on that note, Alex, just a clarification then. If you took what Fran is suggesting, except not 10% a year, 10% over 4 to 5 years, that's actually lower than 3.5%. So the clarification is option 3 is 10% a year,
Each year.
each year for 4 to 5 years.
Yes, right there. Each
So
year.
just so that we're clear. Okay, so
Yeah.
we will call the vote on the amendment, which is option 3, 10%. Are you voting or you were still? I thought you were really eager to vote.
I was doing something, I was right with you until, until you summarized it. So it's 10% a year. And then in addition, there is the cost of living adjustment that we have been getting all along.
So if cost of living is 3, that's 13% a year.
That, yeah.
Well,
whatever.
that's Not right.
So is it going to be just a flat 10% each year, including that cost of living adjustment? Whether the cost of living adjustment is 0, 1, 4, or 8? Or is it going to be this plus that? That's all I want to know.
I would think in fairness, we didn't know it was the cost of living adjustment before.
Yeah,
Alex?
So as written, these increases do not contemplate a cost of living increase. If council wishes to just increase a flat 10% over 4 years, that would be council's prerogative. We can work that in.
Yes.
We'll take council direction on that.
Okay,
would
let's
make
vote on
sense.
that, number 3.
I'm reading this.
Better turn your mic on then, Counselor Fowler.
Okay, sorry. I'm looking at this as 10% adjustment each year. So that's quite a bit of money compared to 2 or 3%.
But it's based on a low number.
Okay, vote on the amendment, phase 3. Option 3. Although,
No.
Okay.
Well, what would be the cost total by 2028 for if we went to this option 3? What is the impact on the budget?
you need a calculator with you there.
Well,
Alex. Hold on, Alex got the answer, I think.
So over 4 years, the total would be $72,630.
4 years.
Thank you.
Gonna break it
All
down.
those in favor of option 3, the amendment? 3, 4 opposed? That's defeated. So now, is there a other suggestion? The current Warden Smith.
I just have one that we never do another review and save our money.
I don't have a problem with that either. If you do it by a percentage every year, you don't need another review. Is the way we look at it, so I don't know, maybe we're wrong. There you go. So is anybody going to make a suggestion? Option 3 is obviously out, so it's either 1 or 2. Greenwood Spears.
Question to the treasurer and that, what is the financial impact of option 2?
So that would be $63,597 hitting the 2025 budget. So
I don't know if I can make an amendment sitting here, can I?
Well, you have to turn the chair.
Oh. We'll see, nobody's making a suggestion. Would Warden Smith take the chair back? Well, I think you can do it from there.
I'll just do it from here. All right, sure.
I
Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment. I would like to make the amendment that is 3.5% a year.
Do we have a seconder? Counselor Gowdy? Discussion. Jerry?
I think you need to start with a lump sum and then I can go with the 3.5, like maybe 2,000 plus the 3.5%. 3.5% is not enough. That's just essentially the real cost of living. You know, I think 2% is insufficient as it is, but
Okay, anyone else? So. Ray?
She seemed to be thinking. What about 2 plus the cost of living? What would the impact of that be? On a, I know, that's really asking.
Hold on.
Wait.
So
And
that,
that's going to correct Fran through me.
We need to discuss what's on the table
Okay.
and what was on the table.
So if I could just get some clarification, because the motion was that council receive a 3.5% per year increase. Is that for 1 year, 10 years, forever and ever? Is there a time limit on that or?
For the rest of this term.
Sure, for the rest of this term or for Fran's next review.
Never. So would you read that back again, Jeanette, so we know what we're voting on?
So you will be voting on that you're choosing a whole new option, that council receive a 3.5% per year increase for the remainder of the council term.
Okay. All right, any more discussion? All those in favor? 2, 3, opposed? Motion's carried. There we go, we're done. Back to you.
Thank you.
Amendment.
I don't know, do we have to vote on something originally or nothing?
You have to revote on the motion as amended.
What's the motion then?
It includes that first part that we just clarified. But there's 3 other pieces at the end. There's a 20%. 10% above the council salary for the deputy warden. Continue the practice of reviewing once per council term, which I think is up for discussion, and having those comparators.
Okay, so you saw the 3 and further that council, Jeanette wants to try to read it clearer.
So the motion as amended will be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, Gallagher Services Canada Group, Inc., 2024 Council Compensation Survey and Review Report, and further that council approve a council increase of 3.5% per year for the remainder of this council term, and further that council continue the current practice of paying a premium for the deputy warden of 20% above the councillor's salary commencing in the next term of council, and further that council continue to practice the practice of reviewing council compensation once per council term, and further that council expand the comparator group to include Hastings County, United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and possibly Renfrew County.
Pardon?
That needs to be an amendment to the motion.
The only other comment that I would like to make that I missed was they also suggested that your daily compensation is not enough if you're attending somewhere. Nobody touched that one, but anyway.
well, I hadn't got there that far yet. So when Jeanette read the motion, I didn't hear anything in the motion about continuing the current benefits. well, I guess it's the same thing then, per diems, conventions and best practices. I think that should go to 200 today.
I think we should have dental. I just paid $1,600 yesterday.
It's too late. Seniors already get dental.
No, they don't.
So, on that note, does anybody want to change anything now or we're going to vote? Are you making that
I'd
motion
like to make
to
the motion
change?
that the per diem rate, that all our current benefits continue. It's a 3.5% increase for the next 2 years for council. And or to the end of this current term, and that the per day compensation increase from $150 to $200.
Do we have a seconder? Uh-oh, wait, hold on.
Sorry, if I could just clarify for council, the per diem, when you're attending something that's within your jurisdiction and it's just a meeting such as the library board, it's $150 per day. If you're away at a conference where you're out of town overnight, it's $250 per day. So
Yeah.
that is your per diems. It's not $150 across the board.
Shows you what I knew, because I thought 150 looked awful low. I thought we were making more than that.
You're not making anything, you break even.
Your cost of living is too high. Go ahead.
I was thinking of, we have members of the public in certain committees and so on, we're paying them 150. We raise that to 200. We might be looking at, I don't know.
That's a different topic.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Alright.
not in this here
Okay,
conversation.
then I'm good with this.
Okay, so
No,
everybody's had their say? All in favor of the motion as presented?
Sorry, there's an amendment there as well.
What was the
My
amendment now?
hearing, that council continue with because you have not accepted option one. Option one would have been your current benefit per diem. Okay, so sorry, my mistake.
Okay, so we're clear. It is what Jeanette read before. 3.5% for the
My
rest of this
apologies.
term, and we'll go from there. All in favor? Carried. That got there quickly. Consulting briefing. Are there any questions on? Pardon? Is going to come on there? $11:20. And I think Ray will be going too. He just didn't tell you. Hi.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I think it might be my turn to speak to the
Yes.
results of our financial statement audit. So good morning. It's my
Welcome,
pleasure to be
Lori.
here before you. I've pre-circulated our report related to the financial statements, and certainly what I wanted to do this morning is walk through some of the highlights, and then of course, as always, welcome any questions from the group if there are any. So I will share my screen. And hopefully you will be able to see it. Does that look good on your end?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. So we'll jump right into our report, starting on the status slide here in front of you. We are essentially complete, subject to acceptance by council of the financial statements for the year ended December 31, 2023. Moving along in terms of our report, just as a reminder to the group, as you will see in our draft audit report, we do audit to a level of materiality, recognizing there's a lot of volume of transactions that culminate into the financial statements. And certainly from a financial statement audit point of view, we certainly zone in on the things that would be material meaning what would change a user's decision on the financial statement. So I've given you a little bit of background this year in our report to share with you how we come up with that amount. And you will see, which is common for municipal organizations such as yourself, that tends to be either total revenues or total expenses. You can see here the percentages that we do apply. We can go anywhere up to 3%. So we are hovering close to that 3% mark based on the results of previous year's audits, based on the results of our assessment of internal controls and any audit misstatements that might have existed in the previous year. So what that culminates into for fiscal 2023 is we executed our audit in accordance with an overall materiality of $1.5 million. To the extent we identified any differences in the accounts, you'll see later on in our report, we audit to 5% of that number, which in this case would be 75,000. So to the extent we identified any differences in excess of that 75,000 this year, that was certainly our threshold to have a conversation back with management to determine what may or may not be implicated in terms of the financial statements. You would have heard me speak previously in previous fiscal years. From a KPMG audit point of view, our audit methodology continues to be very much a risk-based audit, meaning we stand back looking at the financial statements as a whole, trying to identify where we believe there's a greater risk of material misstatement occurring, and certainly adopting an audit approach relative to those risks. We do have the benefit of auditing a number of similar municipal organizations, so the audit methodology, I would suggest, is pretty similar across the board. And what you'll see here are two things that hopefully should jump out at you on the page. The first one here at the top is related to management override of controls. Interestingly enough, we as your auditor have the judgment to identify what we believe is a risk relative to the financial statements. Layered on top of those risks are certain presumed risks by the profession, not unique to your organization, specifically around the presumed risk of fraud. So that's what you see at the top of the page here is the management override of controls. Anytime you have a presumed risk of fraud, it is automatically a significant rating, and we are required to do work on that, which we'll see on the next page. The other piece that is new and different, and if you had the opportunity to read through either this report or in the financial statements, very much a new line item for fiscal 2023 is that new accounting standard that I think actually a year ago we had a little bit of a conversation around to say what that would do to the financial statements moving forward. So because it is a new change, because it does have an impact on the financial statements significantly compared to previous accounting standard changes, in that first year, we have taken a risk rating of higher than base. All of the other ones are considered base, which would mean essentially a low risk audit amount. This slide here, I won't go through in detail, but gives you a little bit of the flavor of our response that we are required to address this presumed risk of fraud. Again, not unique to anything that we've identified in your particular municipality. We essentially look at all of the journal entries that are non-routine in nature that could be more prone to error to make sure that they are reasonably accurate and supported. And along with that, any controls related to financial reporting, making sure that there's segregation of duties. You've got a preparer and a reviewer of journal entries. So you can see at the bottom of the page, in terms of findings, nothing significant to bring to your attention. I won't go through this in a lot of detail because I'm sure the treasurer will likely touch upon this as well in his report, but this gives you a little bit of the background around this new accounting standard related to asset retirement obligations. I will say it's been an interesting one, certainly across the municipal space, as municipalities have adopted it in year. And it really required the team to take a comprehensive look at all of the tangible capital assets within the portfolio to identify where there might be legislation or regulation that would require remediation of those assets in the future. Interestingly enough, as municipals have undertaken this analysis, I would say at least 95, maybe even 98% of the amount that ultimately culminates into a liability on the financial statements relates to asbestos existing in the current infrastructure that will need to be remedied at some point in the future. So in terms of the number, you will see here, it was about 1.5 million for 2023. And you will see that the team did do a retroactive adjustment, meaning did a retroactive journal entry essentially to previous years to make the in-year activity consistent when you're looking at the financial statements as a whole. So we've done the work that was required related to the adoption of the new standard. You will see there is a lot of change included in the financial statements, but that is standard note disclosure and certainly comfortable with the analysis that management undertook to properly adopt this standard in 2023. And then, of course, moving forward, it's not a one and done. This liability will need to be remeasured at each financial reporting date. So the team will need to make sure that they keep the records in a certain level of detail to make sure that all of the in-year activity that might happen in future years is appropriately reflected in the financial statements, and will certainly be there to help them with that to the extent that might be required. As a reminder to the group in terms of control deficiencies, we actually have a professional responsibility to share with you any significant deficiencies in internal controls. Pleased to report we have not identified any of those this year. But certainly as part of any financial statement audit, we sit down with the team to understand any changes to systems, processes, and controls, specifically around the financial reporting process. And that would ultimately lead to any conclusion that we might make relative to any deficiencies in internal controls. You will see, in addition to the asset retirement obligation standard this year, there were also a suite of new standards related to financial instruments. Without going into a lot of detail, it really didn't implicate the numbers per se on this adoption of this new suite of standards. What it did change, you will see in the back of the notes to financial statements, there are certain required risk disclosures now, particularly around financial risks like interest rate risk, credit risk, and liquidity risk. So those are included there now as well. And that will certainly continue on into future years as well. This is a nice slide to share with you all of the things that we as your external auditors should be having conversations with you around. Professional standards actually require us to do so. So to the extent any of these matters might have existed through the course of the audit, we do have a requirement to share those with you. But in terms of findings, you will see in each of these items, there are no matters to report for fiscal 2023. Also, as a reminder to the group, to the extent we might provide any non-audit services, we need to be mindful of our independence because that's really the value that we bring to the table as that outside set of eyes. So we're pleased to report today as well, we've not provided any non-audit services to the county through the course of the year. So there's nothing there that might be thought to encroach on our independence as well. And I'm almost complete in terms of the highlights that I think are most relevant. I'll stop here because this is really the culmination of all of our hard work in terms of the audit for 2023. It is in draft, subject to council's approval of the financial statements, but it does say, in our opinion, we believe the financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the financial activities for fiscal 2023. You will see included in here that there is actually, in addition to the audit report this year, which we are required to do as an emphasis of matter, to draw attention to the fact that that new accounting standard was retroactively applied related to the asset retirement obligation. So that's in year of transition. That's unique this year, but it's certainly very much standard practice in this instance, and that will go away in future years, assuming there are no new accounting standards, which there aren't in the near term, that would be expected to have implications on previous years' financial statements. So with that, those are really the highlights that I wanted to share with you today as part of this presentation. And I will stop sharing my screen and pass the mic back and welcome any questions from the group if there are any.
Does council have any highlight questions? I guess the only question I have is, when the audit happens in my own municipality, they call in the mayor to know that. And I don't know if they do that with the warden. They do? Okay. Oh, sorry. They always call in the mayor to say, do I know if there's enough checks and balances in place in finance? I don't know if our council knows that at all. I know Alex, but I don't know who oversees Alex to make sure or whatever. So that's the only question that I ever get asked outside of are the financials shared with council on a consistent basis, all of those things, but I don't know. Apparently we don't do that here, I guess.
So typically through the course of a financial statement audit, we would have regular conversations, both with management at the different layers, usually CAO along with the treasurer, and typically at least once with those charged with governance as well.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, then I assume to accept it. Pardon? Yep. Did you? Oh. Councillor Greenwood Spears?
Okay, it's regarding the WSIB and the figures that seem very high. And your recommendation is that we can reduce our contribution to WSIB at this point in time? Am I correct on that?
So maybe perhaps that might be a better question directed to the treasurer. I know that has been an ongoing conversation item as part of the presentation. I can certainly attest to the fact that the accounting under the current conditions is certainly appropriate, but I know the team was thinking about different options moving forward.
Page 17.
And that might be a question for the next part. corporate services audited financial statement and
Okay.
recommendations.
Actually, I believe that was touched upon the reserve and reserve report, which is coming later in the agenda.
Okay.
But we can touch base upon that then.
Okay.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions for Lori, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next one is corporate service. No, there is no motion. She just told me.
The report is
It-
item.
It's under D.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Councillor Gowdy. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the Corporate Services 2023 Audited Financial Statement Report, and further that Council of the County of Frontenac approve the 2023 Audited Financial Statements of the Corporation of the County of Frontenac, and finally that the Council of the County of Frontenac approve the transfer of the year-end deficit of $37,356 from the stabilization reserve.
Questions?
Just
Warden Smith.
Just a comment, $37,000 of a deficit in a budget this size is incredible in the financial world we're in. Thank you, Alex.
I think that there will be some caution, so for the next budget about reserves and those things. So it looks good this year though, Alex. If there are
You need
no
to
other
be more
comments,
positive.
all in favor? Carry. Office of the Chief Administrative Office. Corporate consideration of a report and opinion by the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Leonard, whereas both the Ontario Land Tribunal and county staff have determined that expropriation of these lands is necessary for the purpose of linking two sections of the Frontenac KMP Trail for the reason of ensuring its continued long-term viability as a public trail within the Frontenac County Trail System. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the office of the Chief Administrative Officer consideration of the report and opinion by the Ontario Land Tribunal for expropriation of lands for the Frontenac KMP Trail, and further that County Council approve the expropriation of an easement over the lands legally described as part of lots 11 and 12, concession 10 in the Township of Palmerston, now the Township of North Frontenac, being parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the draft plan of expropriation, and further that the warden and chief administrative officer be authorized to execute the certificate of approval in the prescribed form pursuant to Section 8(3) of the Expropriations Act, RSO 1990.
Any discussion? Oh, Councillor Fowler.
I was going over this report, the report that's listed below there, and it states that the surveyors would have difficulty to appropriately conduct a survey and have it prepared for registration within a 90-day period. So is this why we're going this route, or is it, do we have another option? And what I'm thinking about is, as far as surveys goes, I'm sure there was a survey, original survey of the KMP Railway. And couldn't that been brought up and used and overlaid on what we have on this property?
Mr. Farrell?
So we did have a new survey completed, as we do all along the trail as we work through this. I think you cut me off there. Sorry, now I lost my trail of thought, but yeah, we did have a complete survey completed, and it's a good point to note to council that we're working through the process. There's the 90-day clock is ticking because we did go through an OLT hearing. That's the reason it's being brought in front of council today, to continue through that process. But it's important to note that we can continue to negotiate right up to when the survey is officially deposited. So the report today is to move forward with that expropriation process, but we do have the ability to continue to negotiate.
Just one question is.
Councillor Fowler, go ahead.
Yes. If the property is going to be resurveyed, is it going to be resurveyed according to the adjustment that the judge suggested?
No, so this is to move forward with the survey that was completed originally, the expropriation survey. However, if we can reach a deal in the meantime, there would be consideration for that type of work.
Sorry, somebody would be going back to the landowner and speaking to him, correct?
Yeah, and that would happen outside of this. This is to move forward with the original plan of expropriation.
I just wanted to say that there are easements all along the trail. We have easements where actually houses are built on the other side of the trail, so they've asked for an easement to cross the trails. We have that all over the place. So it's not, this isn't anything new here. Any other discussion? Councillor Lichty.
So thank you, Warden, Deputy Warden, sorry. The last meeting, we had this discussion of some sorts, and we talked about any excess land and hearing of necessities and whatever else and so on. And we elected not to do a survey because we didn't have enough time, and we elected to proceed as is and exactly in the manner we are doing right now. And then it was just a negotiation with the landowner, and in talking with an individual, it appears that a lease for the land would then allow the existing landowner to retain use of everything except the actual KMP trail itself. And that would take away who owns what and all those other issues that go along with it.
Okay, so the motion's on the table. If there are no other discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Carry. Corporate Services request by the Township of South Frontenac to release money. What? Which one did I miss? Is there two? Oh, I'm sorry. Request for access across the KMP trail. Not that one either?
So this is item F for approval of the application to expropriate lands for the purpose of the KMP Trail. This is a separate property. And through you, Deputy Warden Vandewaal, we'll just go to the resolve clauses moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Lichty. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the office of the Chief Administrative Officer approval of the application to expropriate lands for the purpose of the KMP Trail at part of lots 11, concession 10, geographic township of Palmerston, township of North Frontenac, being part 1 on draft plan of expropriation, and further that county council approve the expropriation of the lands legally described as part of lot 11, concession 10, geographic township of Palmerston, township of North Frontenac, being part 1 on draft plan of expropriation, and further that the warden and chief administrative officer be authorized to execute the certificate of approval in the prescribed form pursuant to section 8(3) of the Expropriations Act.
Discussion? Warden Smith?
Just a comment that this would be the same in that if there's any negotiations that can happen, will continue, just that the clock is ticking, right?
Correct.
All those in favor? Carry. Now we're at G.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Councillor Gowdy. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the KMP Trail report request for access across the Frontenac KMP Trail at South St. Andrews Lane, located at Lot 12, Concession 2, being Part 1 on Registered Plan 13R23099, Geographic Township of Hitchinbrook, Township of Central Frontenac, and that in accordance with bylaw number 17-1995, council pass a bylaw to declare the subject land surplus for the purpose of granting a right-of-way over the lands occupied by the KMP Trail for the purpose of formalizing access. Subject to the proposed easement is surveyed and identified as Part 1 on Reference Plan 13R23099 and can be described as where South Street Andrews Lane intersects with the Frontenac KMP Trail. The description in the transfer and the schedule for consent endorsement, application number B 4523 OS, shall be for the creation of an easement in order for the applicants to retain rights to cross the Frontenac KMP Trail at this location. The lots that shall benefit from this easement are existing waterfront residential lots located in the township of Central Frontenac. One is 1407 South Street, South St. Andrews Lane, assessment roll number 103904001002710. And the second one is 141 South St. Andrews Lane. And further, that the warden and clerk be authorized to execute agreements of purchase and sale and all other documents required to complete this transaction.
Question? Counselor Greenwood Spears?
I'm just curious, does this prevent the person that is doing the crossing that has that right of way for it from putting up a fence or a gate or something to stop the trail users from mistakenly going up and down their right of way?
Mr. Allen?
They're able to put up a fence at the property line. Where this is a perpendicular crossing, they're able to fence at the property line so that they trail users don't enter their property or their right of way off of the KMP trail, but they're not allowed to, based on the easement, obstruct the KMP trail from recreation uses.
Thank you.
I missed something in the first paragraph. Could you read it again for me? No. All those in favor? Carried. 2024-060 Corporate Services Request.
Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Leonard. Be it resolved that Council of the County of Frontenac authorize staff to commence releasing funds to the Township of South Frontenac on submitted eligible invoices for its seniors housing project based on the disbursement formula in line with the progression of the project, covering 33.33% of eligible expenses up to a maximum of $339,179.53.
Questions? Counselor Greenwood Spears?
Thank you. Given that Frontenac Islands was the only one that took advantage and built the seniors housing at this point in time, I was a little surprised to see that the value of the Verona project is budgeted at 40 million. I'm wondering how many seniors housing are going to be part of that project, because that seems like a big number.
You'll have to ask somebody else. There's 80 units, but they're all not going to be senior. So, don't know. I just want to make sure that council approves the 53 cents. Pardon. Yes, ma'am.
But there
Warden.
definitely is 66% of the cost to entitle you to get the 339. So it's what you pay $1 million to get 339.
Counselor Greenwood Spears?
So going back to that point, the seniors units that are going to be incorporated in this are going to be done at an affordable rate, not at market value, correct?
I don't know the formula of the whole thing yet, because there's going to be some market, there's going to be some geared income, there's going to be a little bit of everything in it, but I can't give you those answers. You can call our CAO or somebody. I'm sure they have them all by now, but maybe not. Counselor Lichty?
Just to be sure that there will be seniors units in this project. That's all.
I can
all wanna
guarantee
know.
that. That's the whole premise of
I
the
know.
start of this.
Okay, I'm good.
Any other questions? All in favor? Carry. Emergency Transportation Services.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Lichty. Be it resolved that the Council of the County of Frontenac receive the Emergency and Transportation Services Neighbor Saving Neighbors Study Update Report for information, and further that the Council of the County of Frontenac support continuing the Neighbor Saving Neighbors program through to November 2024.
Questions? Obviously, it's a good program. All in favor? Carry. Corporate service request.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Councillor Gowdy. Be it resolved that staff be authorized to engage legal counsel to negotiate the terms and agreement with the Township of Frontenac Islands to indemnify the County of Frontenac and cover all county costs related to the County of Frontenac, amending boarding policies to remove all restrictions during peak commuter hours, thereby deleting the reference to a 3,000 kilogram weight limit in policies MS 12-019 heavy truck restriction, MS 17-01 heavy truck restriction, period agricultural related exemptions, and MS 12-018 weekend and holiday truck restrictions. And further, that prior to the lifting of these restrictions, this agreement come back to County Council for approval.
Discussion? Counselor Saunders.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. I guess I would ask that this be done in an expedient, if that's the right word, manner. We've been working on this now since last November, and it just seems like it continues on and on and on, and we're using a lot of council time, a lot of staff time. So I'd ask that it be done in an expedient manner.
Actually, the warden and the deputy warden thought that we would make an amendment to this, but we were advised by legal to make sure that they have everything right and they come back. So I guess, is that fair enough for the answer unless Mr.
So if approved, we'll engage with legal to draft that formal agreement, work with Frontenac Island staff to get that signed, and then hopefully bring it back to council for final approval.
And hopefully that's on the July meeting. If it's done. Any questions or comments? I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to the CAO, Vanessa. She asked at one of our meetings, and so did Councillor Holton, if we could have a brief meeting with the CAO and the warden and myself. And they come up with this idea and they agreed to it. So generally we said that's what we were asking for. So they said they would take it back, and that's where we are today. All in favor? Carry. Information reports. Any questions on transportation? Reserves and reserve funds? Planning and economic development? Return to council. Councillor Greenwood Spears. Who wrote this report? Okay, so noted. Any other questions on the planning or economic or none? Return to council.
Moved by Warden Smith, seconded by Deputy Warden Vanderwall, that council revert from committee of the whole council to council.
All in favor? Carried.
And Ray has to leave for another event. Okay.
Moved by Deputy Warden Vanderwall, seconded by Warden Smith, that the report of the committee of the whole council be adopted and the necessary bylaws, actions and bylaws be enacted.
Discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
Moved by Deputy Warden Vanderwall, seconded by Councillor Leonard, be it resolved that the correspondence from Hastings County and the Township of Sterling Rawdon calling on the provincial and federal governments to implement sustainable infrastructure funding for small rural rural municipalities be received. And further, that the Council of the County of Frontenac supports the establishment of an intergovernmental working group which would include a member of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus to develop a plan on how to deal with the impending debt dilemma facing small rural municipalities. And further, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Fraser, Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, Rami Bowers, President and CEO of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Kinga Thuma, Minister of Infrastructure, the Honorable Paul Calandra, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Scott Reed, MP, Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, Mark Garrettson, MP, Kingston and the Islands, John Jordan, MPP, Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, Ted Shue, MPP, Kingston and the Islands, AMO, Roma, EOWC, and all municipalities in Ontario.
Discussion. Go ahead, Ron.
It's like a dream, but if we wake up and it's reality, that'll be great. But we know it's been tried before but anyway, sustainable funding would be wonderful.
We
You
have,
know what you have to deal with.
we have to keep asking. All right, all those in favor? Carried. All right, is there any giving of notices of motion? Seeing none, communications? There's a few pages of communications. Any other business? No other business. Bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Fowler. Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Gowdy. Resolved that leave be given to the mover to introduce bylaws A through E that have been circulated to all members of County Council, and that bylaws A through E be read a first and second time.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried.
Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Gowdy. Resolved that bylaws A, B, D, and E be read a third time, signed, sealed, and finally passed.
All those in favor? Carried.
Moved by Councillor Greenwood Spears, seconded by Councillor Saunders, that the meeting hereby adjourn at 11:20 a.m.
Any discussion on that?